Hi everyone, it's Lisa and this is Always Cinema Chic, the place that encourages you to go out, get dressed up, and watch a movie. So Thor Ragnarok stars Chris Hemsworth, Tom Hiddleston, Cate Blanchett, Tessa Thompson, Jeff Goldblum, and Mark Ruffalo, and it's directed by Taika Waititi. And let me say, this movie was so much fun to watch, and it was really beautiful. It was gorgeous. It surprised me with how incredible the images actually were. So I think it is very safe to say that this third installment absolutely blows the other Thor films out of the water. I had so much more fun watching this. So it takes place during the time of Captain America Civil War, and this is when Thor and the Hulk are away from Earth. So this time around the villain is Hela, who's brilliantly played by Cate Blanchett, and she's taken over Asgard as the goddess of death. Hela is a formidable adversary as she's able to destroy Thor's hammer with the least bit of effort. Much of the movie is Thor trying to get back to Asgard, but he can't do that before compiling this kind of ragtag group of misfits that can defeat Hela. And while that may really sound like Guardians of the Galaxy, I was pleasantly surprised to find that the tone wasn't exactly the same in these two movies. When I think of Guardians, I think of Peter Quill and how he's a child of the 80s, and it's really sarcastic, but it's also a little laid back in a kind of Motown vibe, whereas this is like a late 70s hard rock space opera, and it kind of reminded me of She-Ra and He-Man, two cartoons that I would always watch growing up in the 80s. And so I was happy that the tone wasn't exactly the same. It has its own distinct feeling, and much of what makes this movie work is that Thor is actually funny. And I don't just mean the characters who are surrounding Thor, but I mean Chris Hemsworth is actually funny as Thor. So I first realized that Hemsworth is a funny guy when I saw him in Ghostbusters, where to me he was the funniest person in the entire film. I feel bad saying that, but I didn't think that movie was very funny. But here he even grows his comedic acting chops even further, and he makes a Thor who is a little bit awkward and kind of clumsy and a little slightly bit narcissistic, I would say. And I loved that he was so different in this film from the other ones. And they put Hemsworth against some really great comedic heavyweights like Jeff Goldblum, who is just perfect in this movie. I mean, he could not be more perfect as the Grand Master. And the makeup is great, and the costumes look awesome. And so he gets to meet the Grandmaster by going to the planet Sakaar. I won't say how that happens, but it does happen, and Sakaar is a place that a lot of aliens are basically sent so that they can fight in this gladiator-style arena, and that's how Thor and the Hulk reunite. And so, without giving anything more away, once we're brought to Sakaar and introduced to the Grandmaster, the movie definitely takes off in terms of stories and visuals. And then also added to this film is Valkyrie, who's played by Tessa Thompson, who once used to be a great warrior, but now is kind of just a drunk, but she can still knock out any person that she meets. I will admit that at one point it kind of felt like I was watching Westworld, because between Tessa Thompson and Anthony Hopkins, and then there's another cameo that I will not name, it really did remind me of like, oh my god, these are all the characters from my favorite TV show. And that's another thing. There are a ton of really fun cameos in this movie that were genuinely surprising. I had no idea that these people were going to be in the movie, so I'm definitely not going to tell you that right now. But these four characters really do have great interaction with each other, and they have a lot of history, and that leads to a lot of funny sequences. But I did feel like it never quite reached that kind of funny but heartfelt tone that Guardians has, which is why I do like Guardians better, just for that reason. But this movie does boast one of my favorite villains that I've ever seen in the Marvel Universe. I think Cate Blanchett as Hela is just so awesome and evil and funny, and she is this beautiful creature with like these antlers growing out of her, and the costume was just so cool. And Cate Blanchett, to begin with, is just one of my favorite actresses, but she's been given a character where she's really very much involved in the action, and she gets to be in some really cool fight sequences, and she looks amazing while doing it, and she's that perfect combination of evil but having a good bit of fun while being evil. And all I know is that I'm a little bit sad that Halloween just happened, because I definitely would have been her character, but now I know for sure who I'm going to be for next year. She just looks awesome in the movie, and she is awesome in this movie. And I'll also say that the visuals are outstanding, and the artistry is certainly different from other films in the Marvel universe. It's a much more retro looking color scheme of like red and white, turquoise and white, green and white, basically anything in white, as well as having many scenes with a complementary color palette. So some of the action sequences at the end reminded me of the cover to like a Wolfmother album, which of course is a throwback to the 70s. And let's talk about the action sequences at the end of the movie, because they were awesome. They were just so gorgeous looking. And sometimes in the Marvel movies, I find the action sequences, they're great, I love them, but sometimes they're a little bit too long. But here I found myself wanting more, which is definitely a good thing. And there were certain shots that reminded me a little bit of like Zack Snyder style in 300, or the Amazons in Wonder Woman, because Thor comes in like the lightning bolt that he was born to be on these diagonals, and those shots were just so cool. And it reminded me even more of like album art from the 1970s, and it was just so different from what I'm used to seeing in these type of movies. And that brings me to the soundtrack. So first of all, they played Led Zeppelin's The Immigrant Song twice in the movie, and I was in heaven, because that's one of my favorite songs, and it just perfectly fits the tone of the movie. And another criticism that I've heard, and I agree with, about the Marvel movies is that the music is not very memorable. The score is really nothing to write home about. But here, the score is very distinct, and it's very retro feeling, and it fits the movie perfectly. But that's not to say that I felt every single element of this movie was perfect. It was very good. I really enjoyed it. But some things that I thought they could have worked on, the beginning was a little bit slow in the pacing. I thought it could have moved along a little bit more, maybe even amp up the stylized aspect, because the beginning isn't quite as 70s stylized as like the middle and the end were. And I also felt that while the chemistry is really great with all of the characters, it never really achieves that sort of heartfelt and genuine moment. And I just personally, I kind of like a mix of both. And Valkyrie and Thor, they're great at hating each other, but I thought that there could have been a bit more chemistry in their love-hate relationship. And it kind of kills me that Idris Elba's character was not in the movie that much. He's very somber when he's in the film, because he has to be. That's who his character is. But I really wish that he was a bigger part of the script. He's such a funny guy in real life. He's full of life and vivacity, and I feel like Idris Elba just would have fit in with this group so well. And so I wish they had attached his character to the group. It really looked like he was part of the group in the trailers, but it's really just the 4 characters that are part of that group trying to defeat Hela. So that one part was also a bit disappointing to me, but I'm still really impressed with Marvel and the fact that they were able to acknowledge that they had 2 misfires with the previous Thor movies, and they were able to just change the tone by 180 degrees. I had watched, like yesterday, I think I watched an interview where Hemsworth was saying that so much of the dialogue was actually improvised, and I kind of couldn't believe it, because I can't believe that such a big studio would allow for the actors to improvise the dialogue. But that's what makes Marvel better than DC. They're just willing to take chances and try different things with their films, and as a result, they're making, you know, in my opinion, much better films than DC. And a lot of that has to do with the director, Waititi. He is so funny in general. He's a comedian, and he plays Korg in the movie, who's this rock alien, and he's very funny as that character. But he had done the mockumentary What We Do in the Shadows, which is so quirky and oddball and different, and he applies that same kind of tone of just like sheer quirkiness to a Marvel movie, and it works so well. And I'm glad that Marvel took a shot with a director who's a little bit smaller, that never worked with such a big budget before, because taking that risk is definitely paying off in their work. So now for the grades. In terms of film and artistry, I would give Thor Ragnarok a B+. I thought it was so much fun. It's beautifully shot. I love the color palette of this movie. It was just so gorgeous to watch. It also boasts Chris Hemsworth's best performance as Thor ever. I actually think this is probably the best performance I've ever seen him give in a movie, and it has a great villain with Cate Blanchett. Some of the negatives were the fact that it was a little bit drawn out in certain parts. I thought the pacing could have been a little bit better, and there could have been a bit more in the characterization department for me. So I wouldn't quite say that this movie was as good as Guardians, but it's definitely one of the top Marvel movies that I've ever seen. And then in terms of watchability, which is how much I enjoy the movie, well, there I would give Thor Ragnarok an A, because I really enjoyed watching this movie. I think you can tell by now I really like to analyze and deconstruct films, but sometimes, every once in a while, you just want to watch something that's entertaining, but something that's well made and entertaining, and Thor Ragnarok definitely fills that void to me. Like I said, it's not as good as Guardians. I really just, my heart belongs to that movie, but this is one of the best. And one more thing, if I were DC, I would be a little nervous right now, because Marvel has been consistently hitting it out of the park. I thought Spider-Man Homecoming was just so awesome, and this film was so much fun. I'm going to see Justice League next week, but I kind of can't imagine a world where Justice League is actually better than Thor Ragnarok. I can't see it happening. I'm going to be really open-minded going into it, but I'm just not sure. And I also thought that Thor Ragnarok was better than Wonder Woman, which I think is their best DC movie. So, you know, if this was better than their best DC movie, we'll see about Justice League, but I hope it's really good. I hope they did a great job with it. But thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate it so much. If you liked the video, please like and subscribe. Leave a comment below. I'm sure so many people are going to be watching this movie, so I'd love to hear what you think about it. And remember, it is always in fashion to go out, get dressed up, and make it a cinema chic night. Bye, guys.